I never thought I would see my life unravel the way it did. Growing up, I always heard stories about people falling through the cracks, but I never imagined I would be one of them. My name is David, and this is the story of how mass incarceration shattered not only my life, but the lives of everyone around me, my family, my community, and, most painfully, my children. I was 24 years old when the system first pulled me under. A stupid mistake. A desperate, misguided attempt to provide for my family. It was supposed to be quick and harmless, a one-time thing. Just a few extra dollars to help me pay the rent and put food on the table. My girl was pregnant with our second child, and the bills were stacking higher than I could count. I was working 2 jobs, doing everything I could to keep us afloat. But it wasn't enough. It never felt like enough. So, I made a decision that changed everything. I thought I was being smart, thought I was in control. But you know how it goes, the moment you think you're untouchable is the moment life reminds you just how fragile everything is. I got caught. They made an example out of me. 6 years, they said. 6 years of my life snatched away in an instant. I remember sitting in that courtroom, staring blankly at the judge as he passed my sentence. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. My girl, Maria, was sitting behind me, clutching her stomach, our baby kicking inside her. I could hear her soft sobs, muffled by her hand over her mouth. I couldn't even turn to look at her. I felt like I had failed. I had failed her, failed our unborn child, and failed my little boy, who was waiting for me to come home. I was supposed to protect them, supposed to provide. And now, I was the reason they were about to face a future I never wanted for them. They put me in the back of a police van and took me to a place that would become my personal hell. Prison. There's nothing that can prepare you for the sound of those bars clanging shut behind you. It's like the world outside no longer exists, like you've been erased. And for those of us who end up behind bars, that's exactly how it feels. Like you've disappeared, and nobody cares if you ever make it back. For the first few weeks, I barely slept. The noise, the constant tension, the threat of violence hanging in the air like a storm cloud, it was suffocating. But more than anything, it was the isolation that broke me. I was alone, surrounded by hundreds of other men, but more alone than I had ever been. Maria visited at first, but I could see the strain it put on her. Every visit, I watched her grow a little more distant, a little more tired. She was doing it all on her own, raising 2 kids, working, keeping everything together. And I was stuck in here, powerless to help her. Powerless to even hold her when she cried. Our phone calls became shorter, fewer. And then, one day, they just stopped. I didn't blame her. I didn't have the right to. But it tore me apart, knowing I had pushed her to the edge, knowing that I was the reason she had to give up on us. I missed the birth of my daughter. I missed her first words, her first steps, her first day of school. I missed my son growing up, missed the moments that mattered most. And I couldn't get them back. I couldn't do anything but sit in that cell and watch time slip away. Prison changes you in ways you can't even begin to understand until you've been there. It strips you down, takes away your dignity, your sense of self. I wasn't David anymore. I was just another number, another body taking up space in an overcrowded system. The days blurred into one another, each one a repeat of the last. Wake up, eat, work, sleep, if you could call it that. Every day was a battle to hold on to some small piece of who I used to be, but the longer I was inside, the more that piece faded. What broke me most wasn't the violence, the fear, or even the loneliness. It was the guilt. The guilt of knowing that while I was stuck in here, my family was out there, struggling without me. My son started acting out in school, getting into fights, skipping class. He was angry, confused. He didn't understand why his dad wasn't there. He needed me, and I wasn't there for him. Maria would send me letters sometimes, telling me how hard it was, how she was doing her best, but it wasn't enough. And I couldn't do a damn thing to help her. 6 years. 6 long, brutal years. When they finally let me out, I thought I would feel free. I thought I would feel relief, joy even. But all I felt was fear. Fear of what I was walking back into. Fear that I wouldn't be able to fix what had been broken. Fear that I was no longer the man my family needed me to be. And in a way, I wasn't. I came out of that place damaged, a shadow of the person I used to be. My kids barely recognized me. My daughter, she didn't even know me. I tried to hold her, but she squirmed in my arms, confused, scared. She didn't know her own father. My son was distant, cold. He had grown up without me, and in my absence, he had built walls around himself that I didn't know how to break down. Maria, she had moved on. I could see it in her eyes the moment I walked through that door. We were no longer the same people. The years had changed her as much as they had changed me. But the hardest part wasn't coming home to a broken family. It was coming home to a broken system. I was free, but not really. The world outside had moved on without me. Finding work was nearly impossible. Nobody wanted to hire someone with a record. I was labeled a criminal, an ex-con, and that label followed me everywhere I went. Every interview, every application, it was like a neon sign flashing above my head, "Don't trust him." I tried, I really did. I wanted to prove to my family, to my community, that I could be better. That I had learned from my mistakes. But the doors kept closing in my face. And then there was the parole. The constant monitoring, the check-ins, the drug tests, the restrictions. It was like I was still in prison, only without the bars. One slip-up, one missed appointment, and I would be right back where I started. It was a weight I carried every day, the fear that I was one mistake away from losing everything all over again. I remember one night, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the eviction notice on the table. I had been out of work for months, scraping by on what little I could, but it wasn't enough. I was going to lose my home, and I had nowhere to go. My family had fallen apart. My kids barely spoke to me. I was drowning in a world that had no place for me. And in that moment, I broke. I broke in a way I never had before. All the anger, the pain, the guilt, it came crashing down on me. I wanted to give up. I wanted to disappear, to end the suffering. Because that's what it felt like, endless suffering. But something stopped me. It wasn't some grand epiphany, some sudden realization that things would get better. No, it was much simpler than that. It was the memory of my son, sitting in that courtroom all those years ago, watching me get taken away in handcuffs. I couldn't put him through that again. I couldn't let him see his father give up, not after everything he had already lost. So, I fought. I fought to rebuild my life, piece by broken piece. It wasn't easy, and it took years, long, painful years, but I did it. I found work through a re-entry program that gave people like me a second chance. I went to therapy, learned how to deal with the trauma, the anger, the guilt. I reconnected with my kids, slowly, carefully. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was something. It was a start. And now, I fight for others. I fight for the people still stuck in the system, for the families torn apart by mass incarceration. Because it's not just about the people behind bars, it's about the mothers, the fathers, the children left behind. It's about the communities that are broken, generation after generation, by a system that doesn't care about us. My story isn't unique. There are thousands, millions of people just like me, struggling to reclaim their lives after being swallowed by the prison industrial complex. And until we change the system, until we start treating people like human beings instead of numbers, the cycle will continue. I'm not whole. I'm not healed. But I'm here. And I'm fighting. Because I refuse to let the system win. I refuse to let it take away my humanity, my family, my future. We deserve better. We all do. As I began to rebuild my life, it was hard to know where to start. I was carrying so much anger, guilt, and shame that it felt impossible to move forward. But I knew I couldn't go back to the man I was. I had to find a way to break the cycle, not just for me, but for my kids, for the people I loved, and for the community that had been broken by so much loss. The first step was admitting that I couldn't do it alone. That was a hard pill to swallow because I had spent my entire life trying to be strong, to take care of things on my own. But I had to acknowledge that what I had been through had damaged me in ways I couldn't fix by myself. That's when I found therapy. At first, therapy felt uncomfortable. It was foreign to sit across from someone and talk about feelings I had been pushing down for years. I was used to bottling things up, acting like I was okay even when I wasn't. But my therapist helped me see that the walls I had built around myself were only trapping me in pain. Slowly, week by week, I started to open up. I learned that the anger I had carried for so long wasn't just about the system or about what I'd lost. A lot of it was about the way I felt about myself, like I wasn't good enough, like I had failed the people who depended on me. We worked through that. We talked about forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. That was the hardest part, accepting that I could still be worthy of love, even after all the mistakes I had made. My therapist introduced me to mindfulness, teaching me how to stay present and grounded, instead of letting my mind spin out with guilt about the past or fear about the future. I started meditating. At first, I thought it was silly, but over time, it helped. Those moments of stillness became an anchor when everything felt overwhelming. But therapy was just one part of it. I also found support in my community. The re-entry program I joined gave me the tools I needed to navigate life after prison. They helped me find work, offering not just job placement but also job training that gave me new skills. More importantly, they connected me with people who had been through the same struggles I had. I wasn't alone anymore. I found a brotherhood in those men, each of us trying to reclaim our lives in a system designed to keep us down. I also began to focus on my relationships, particularly with my kids. I realized that I had spent so much time beating myself up for not being there that I had forgotten that I still had time to make things right. I started small, reaching out more, showing up for them in ways I hadn't before. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of awkward silences and missed connections, but eventually, the walls between us started to come down. I learned that being present didn't mean being perfect, it just meant being there, consistently, day by day. And while things with Maria never went back to how they were, we found a way to co-parent and to support our children together. We made peace with the fact that our relationship had changed, and that was okay. What mattered most was creating a stable, loving environment for our kids, something they could count on no matter what. It took time, years, in fact, but little by little, I started to see that I wasn't the man I had been before prison. I had grown. I had learned. And though I still had scars, I was healing. But the real breakthrough came when I found a book that changed everything. Behind Bars, Beyond Broken, Reclaiming Our Families and Communities from Mass Incarceration landed in my hands at a time when I needed it the most. It wasn't just another self-help book. It felt like it was written for people like me, people who had been through the fire, who knew what it was like to be torn apart by the system and were trying to figure out how to piece their lives back together. The book didn't sugarcoat anything. It acknowledged the pain, the anger, the struggles. But it also offered a roadmap, a way forward. It talked about healing not just as individuals, but as families and communities. It laid out practical steps to rebuild relationships, to overcome the stigma of being an ex-convict, and to reclaim the dignity that the system tries to take from you. What struck me the most was the focus on community. I realized that I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my family, for my neighborhood, for every person who had been touched by mass incarceration. The book challenged me to get involved, to be a part of the solution. It talked about advocacy, about standing up against the laws and policies that perpetuate this cycle of brokenness. And that's exactly what I did. I started speaking out, sharing my story in schools, churches, and community centers. I became an advocate for prison reform, working with organizations that are pushing to end mass incarceration and to provide better support for people coming home. This book gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for the next generation. If you're listening to this and you're going through what I went through, or maybe you know someone who is, I'm here to tell you that there's hope. There's a way out of the darkness. And for me, the game changer was Behind Bars, Beyond Broken, Reclaiming Our Families and Communities from Mass Incarceration. The steps in this book transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. If you're struggling like I did, grab a copy. It might just be the lifeline you need to start rebuilding your life, your family, and your community. Don't wait. Your second chance is waiting for you, just like mine was.
We see the sunrise and sunset because of Earth's rotation about its own axis. Earth is rotating about its own axis from west to east. So,
we
when
see the
seen from the
sunrise
Earth,
and
the sun
sunset
appears
because
to
of
rise
Earth's
in the east
rotation about its own axis. Earth is rotating about its own axis from west to east. So when seen from the Earth, the sun appears to rise in the east and set in the west.
We see the sunrise and sunset because of Earth's rotation about its own axis. Earth is rotating about its own axis from west to east. So when seen from the Earth, the sun appears to rise in the east and set in the west.
We see the sunrise and sunset because of Earth's rotation about its own axis. Earth is rotating about its own axis from west to east. So when seen from the Earth, the sun appears to rise in the east and set in the west.